Okay, it says we're streaming live, and I'm just making sure that we're also streaming on Facebook. Yeah, we are. Hey, Andrew.
Hello, Sarah.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
This is part 2. Someone yesterday on Facebook was like, I can't believe that you're doing 8 weeks free. And I was like, yeah, we can get a lot of good conversation in 8 weeks. And if folks like what we're talking about, they can reach out to us. So today we're talking about teens and mindfulness. And we've been around the block, so to speak, with this one.
Yeah, you've done, I think, didn't you do a whole year of a mindfulness in schools program?
Yeah, I'm Mindful Schools certified. And that's a really trauma-informed program. I really liked their program. I don't know the direction that it took now, but I really liked it when I was in it. And yeah, while I was doing that certification, in part, I was at the public charter and, implementing mindfulness K-8. And then I went to the private therapeutic, working with kids with autism. And I started working with like mindfulness and autism, and like through the lens of a trauma-informed approach. It was amazing. There's so much there with that. So yeah, and then you were, at Odyssey, you did mindfulness every day. You did centering.
Yeah, my mindfulness in school starts as a college professor in 2006, when I starting every single college class I taught with a very brief meditation period.
Yeah.
Drop us into a space, just an experience of quiet and stillness, and then it's interesting.
Can I go and interject right there? Because you just mentioned a skill that I want to name is a skill to do mindfulness at the point of transitions. Like if families did mindfulness at the point of transitions, huge gains with just a moment of a mindful breath when you're switching from this to this. So, okay. Little tip now, go ahead.
Don't you find, though, that trying to do mindfulness with our own kids or kids at school, my experience, there's a whole lot of resistance, right?
Well, yes, they're teenagers.
Yeah.
Their job is resistance.
Yeah.
Their job is self-identity.
I can remember one of the most beautiful experiences I had with mindfulness is I started a Montessori middle school program in Atlanta, and we meditated every day. So I've got these 7th graders. 6 7th graders that I was with all week, and we meditated every day before lunch. Like I would do like a guided meditation and then drift off into silence. And I I knew that something cool was happening when a few months into the school year, the kids would be having a little hard time, and they would take their meditation cushion over to the corner, and they would face the wall, and they would sit upright and do meditation on their.
Oh, Andrew, you just got muted. You were like magically muted there. I didn't mute him, everyone. That was spontaneous. So they were voluntarily doing this to feel better after you had taught them.
Yeah, and I would say in general that that mindfulness in schools is an uphill battle, and I would say most kids that I know have don't value it very much. They think it's kind of a waste of time. They're not interested in going there. And so it's a real challenge to, I think, cultivate it. And I think it starts with if the adults in the space are not practitioners themselves, then the hypocrisy of the entire thing is exposed. And teenagers are world-class experts in exposing adult hypocrisy.
Isn't that true?
Oh, they're so good at it.
All right. Yeah, so good. So we have some folks watching, and I want to say, if you have questions, put them in the Facebook comments. We're looking from Zoom, and I'm checking over to Facebook every now and again. So pop a comment if you have one or a question for Andrew and I. And we're talking about teens and mindfulness and the resistance that's naturally going to be there. So I'm kind of really passionate about something right now that I want to begin talking about, and then we can bring our conversation back in about the resistance. So I want to paint a picture after being with some teens lately that reminded me sort of what we're up against, and my own. I have a tween. I have a 12-year-old. Andrew has, your boys are how old?
14 and 10.
14 and 10 in the house. Okay. So right now, given last week in our conversation, we went through, here are all the things that are going on in the world right now. The world is a stressful place right now, and the social isolation, everything is stressful. We went into that last week. We all know it's stressful. I won't go into all the reasons why. What I do want to bring up this week is that when we're talking about teens and self-regulation and self-identity, what we are, up against as adults and as parents is that child, that young person with the evolving identity, has to be able to feel better inside of themselves than they would feel if they did the things that we don't want them to get into. Right? So we don't want them to get into screen addiction. We don't want them to get into drugs. We don't want them to get into various levels of escapism, which all of those are. So if we don't want them to get into that, then they have to know that they can feel as good as that or better in real life inside of themselves. That's what we're talking about. I'm like, let's bring it home. That's what we want. That's what I want kids to feel so good inside of themselves that they don't need to go to those other things. And that is really hard these days.
And I will say it's easier for me to do professionally than personally in my house with my kids, right? So it's so interesting.
Yes,
I will be just doing the thing, and then I will go up and do a one-on-one Zoom guided meditation with another teenager, and realizing I'm not actually doing this with my own kids, right? And I'm guiding these other kids to the exact kind of experiences you're talking about, such that afterwards, when we reflect on it, is almost always a wow, like I dropped into another space that I didn't really know was possible, and I feel so much more peaceful.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that experience, like you want them to taste this fruit and say, do you see how good this fruit is? And if you're feeling like that, if you're feeling this negative thought spiral again, you can just actually hit play. I'll send you this recording. You can hit play on it and do this meditation again. This really personalized meditation that was crafted for you in the moment based on what's going on and kind of between our energetics, right?
Right.
In this call. And it's like, it's just such a powerful experience for young people. If it happens, you can't force it to happen. But in my experience, if you create this space and you invite these kids into this like other reality, that they're like, oh, that's awesome. I want more of that.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to get. Like, yes, you want more of that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Giving them the felt sense and the felt experience. So one thing that's coming up to clarify is the words meditation and the words mindfulness. And it's like two different things. I don't want to spend a lot of time there, but mindfulness, when we're talking about mindfulness, we're talking about brain regulation. We're talking about self-regulation in the brain, going from the stress state, the fight or flight state, into self-regulation and like coming back to a parasympathetic state. So we're teaching the parasympathetic state. Meditation can be more, imaginative, or you can explain maybe how you see that difference. But I just want to say for parents too, like, don't expect your kid to just be able to meditate. Like, we have to teach them the skills of mindfulness and focus and self-regulation. And, the notion of meditation, I think a lot of teenagers who would sit down to quote unquote meditate, they're like, well, my brain is going a mile a minute. So to heck with this meditation stuff. Right. So I really like to make clear with teens, like the brain's job is to think. Like we're not asking it to not think. We're giving it something to focus on. And then we're, taking them through that journey like you were talking about. Go ahead.
I'll just share there's two things that come up with me. I use the terms fairly interchangeable. I understand the distinction that you're making. And the the first line of the Yoga Sutras is that yoga is the quieting of the fluctuations of consciousness, right? And and that's really the end of the asana practice, and the pranayama practice is ultimately like a quieting of those fluctuations, right? And tapping into an experience of reality that goes deeper than our thoughts and feelings, right? So often, so much of the time, especially for young people, but I'd say almost all of us, we identify with our thoughts and feelings and they are us, right? And so I do lots of like creative visualization activities where I attempt to get students to, young people, to imagine an experience of reality where the thoughts and feelings just come in, we observe them, and they pass through, right? Because I want them to tap into like, look, there is a level of consciousness that goes so much deeper than the thoughts and feelings, and it's our attachment to the thoughts and feelings that ultimately produces suffering for us. And if we can have experiences of releasing that, then we open the pathway to less suffering and more liberation. The second definition is one I really like, which is that meditation is the shrinking of the distance between the thought and the awareness of the thought.
Mhm.
I would add feeling too. The awareness, the feeling, and the awareness of the feeling, because especially as we get disengaged from life with our screens, and I say young people, but all of us, we don't always know what's going on inside of us, right? We don't even know the thought or the feeling, like, how am I feeling? What is actually going on inside of me? And so lots of sensory type explorations of feeling the senses, feeling what's going on in the body, and just trying to build a little bit of this kind of metacognitive observational capacity about our thoughts and feelings and sensational experience, right? To me is like really like some of the deep work that gets done that I'm interested in doing with
Yeah.
teens. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Because we, from a very young age, when they're in our school system, the emphasis is on to like have the right thought, perform with the right thought, bring your right, the information from your head. And then there's, the sense of right and wrong. And maybe that's coming up for me because that pressure with that, I see that in my own child. So teaching them to question metacognitively, and teenagers are so ready for that. They're so ready for that. So there was one question I want to get to, some things that we can do, both in the home, and then you and I serve teens because, as we started out saying, teens are inherently resistant creatures. They're working on their self-identity, and so they're most of the time going to be resistant to what parents are doing. So parents, yes, like please model these skills, please do this with your child, and then there are things that others can do with your child that have more of an effect, I would say. So let's just speak to parents for a couple of minutes first. What are some things that we advocate, if your child is experiencing, if they're showing that they want to escape, if they're showing that an inability to self-regulate those emotions, or a disconnect from like what is going on in the body to how they are acting out and what they're saying. How can parents encourage more of that awareness and connection?
Several things come up for me. One is the other day, I asked my 10-year-old what his favorite part of the day was, and he said dinner time, right? And it was because dinner, there were no screens, right? And the three of us, my two sons and I, we just sat and talked. And we all three of us are getting so many inputs in our world, and just the chance to have like, real conversation with real human beings. I mean, the number one correlated experience, or number one correlated experience with kids being positively well-adjusted adults is not genetics, it's not demographics, it's not race, it's not religion, it's not any of the things that we thought it was. And this is fairly old and well-established research. It's actually the number one experience that's correlated with well-adjusted kids becoming adults is having family dinner once a day.
Yeah.
The number one thing, right? And there's something about, I mean, we sit into a moment of mindfulness that we have incorporated in our family is when we sit down, we sit and we hold hands, or we do a forced touch and say a prayer, just like a moment of mindfulness. And I might ask them to share a gratitude for their day, or an appreciation for each other, or for appreciation for themselves, right? And these to me are actually just really beautiful mindfulness practices that can be incorporated into daily family life. And we know these things, and
Right.
yet like we kind of let them slip, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, look, well, we haven't had dinner, like we need to do that. I need to make dinner for the kids, and we need to sit down as a family and share something, real conversation after a real blessing, and creating space for asking open-ended questions. This would be a second thing. Your kids, open-ended questions, and waiting, because the kids don't work on our schedules. They don't open when we want them to open, when we think it's time. Okay, I've scheduled this block in, we're going to do some time. Well, guess what? It may be midnight when your teenager is like ready to open up. And the question is like, do we have the bandwidth as adults to be present for them when they're ready? Because that's the only time when it's going to happen. It will not happen on our schedule.
Right. Both of those point to something that's obvious, and I know parents too are under a lot of pressure right now. I mean, you and I feel it, like working from home and schooling from home and parenting, and so we have to be on our A game right now. Like we have to be, and if parents are feeling less than A game, model some of the things around resiliency that we want our kids to know and practice themselves. So a couple days ago, for example, I worked too long. Like I had the screen fry going, and I pushed myself to do one more task, which I pretty much know better than to do. But my son saw the fallout of that. Like when I went to go make dinner, I wasn't fully present in dinner, and I was fried, and I caught myself and I said, I'm going to go breathe for 5 minutes, because now I'm realizing that I pushed myself too hard on the screens. I looked at the screen for too long. I'm not fully present with you. So I'm going to do this so that I can come back fresh. And so, we have to model the imperfection as well, like model that we're all building that resiliency at the same time. And it really requires a lot of bandwidth and a lot of mindfulness on the parents' part, to be doing this. But if the parents really have a lot of stress, or they don't have the skill sets. We're trained as educators, we're trained as mindfulness educators. And so like, I don't expect parents to know how to do this. This is where people can call us or like, let us breathe with your kid. Or, even like teaching families some basic skills. So the breath regulation, like regulating the moment. Another skill that parents can use is naming what is going on. So, if someone's starting to raise their voice, the mirror neurons and everything, that's going to, naturally happen unless somebody interrupts it, is that, people are going to start raising voices together, and that's going to just blow up, right? So somebody has to interrupt. Somebody has to say, okay, I notice that we're getting heated. I notice that we're raising voices. What do you say we take a couple of breaths? And just like notice out loud and invite is another one. Cool. So there's one question here about how to wean from excessive screen time and encourage them to engage with life itself.
This is it depends on the age of the kid, I think. There's a fine line, I think, between just dictating like, okay, these are the limits.
Yeah.
And like, we're just gonna enforce this limit, right? And cultivating the self-awareness of teens to start to regulate themselves with their screens. And I think it's not an either or, it's a both. Like, I remember when I had a baby, someone told me like, oh, there's the pick 'em ups and the cry it outs, right? Do you pick your kid up and soothe them, or do you let them cry it out? And I was like, that's the most insane false binary ever. Like, sometimes you let them cry it out and sometimes you pick them up. It depends on the circumstance. And so it's not either or. Do I set hard boundaries for my kid from above, or do I work with my kid on, okay, what are your goals here? How is this getting in your way? And how can you be more successful? I mean, for instance, what kids are doing consistently is they are on their doing schoolwork, and they're switching tabs, or they're on their phone, right? And so when I sit with students and do like tutoring work with them, I'm just first observing what they're doing, and then I'm asking them questions. So what's going on with that? Like, how is that working for you? And then help getting, if you can get them to get to the spot of, boy, I'd really like to get this stuff done sooner. Like, okay, well, here's a couple strategies. What do you think about this? What do you think about putting your phone on silent and you don't touch it until this assignment is done? Right? Or set a timer for 20 minutes and then you don't touch it until it's done, right? And getting them, right? But it takes patience.
And then I would add too, asking them how it feels after that strategy, like after they've used the strategy, check back in with them. Okay, what worked? What didn't work? What did you like? Oh, you liked only focusing on the schoolwork and then having a little text break. Great. You want to try it again? Great. Right. So the self-reflective piece of it too, like asking your teen, how did you feel when you engaged with XYZ?
Yeah, because I would love someone doing that for me. Be accountable to like, Andrew, do you realize you just wasted an hour? Like, you were done with your work and you just like scrolled for an hour or read news for an hour. Like, is that really what you want to be doing? And and that's what I want to do with the teens, is like, just really like ask them, like, how do you feel? How does this making you feel? Is this what you want to be doing? What is not getting done because you're doing these things?
This is what I want parents to know and adults to know. Like, kids are going to make the right decision so much more of the time if we start asking them questions like this. Because if we are top down and telling them, like, here is what a healthy screen limit is, here's what, to do with your body, here's what not to do, all of the above, they're going to be like, oh, my parents said that directly to me. Opposition, 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 right? But if you engage a teen and they're so ready for this, their self-identity, they want to know who they are, and they want the opportunity to be who they are and express who they are. And so if you can give, like, lay out the information, right? Or not even lay it. I don't like how I said that, because parents can lecture. I can lecture. But like, let's discover the information together, right? And then let's think critically about how we want to engage with this information. So the other day, my son and I started watching the social media documentary. I can't remember what it's called.
Social Dilemma, that one.
Yes, that one. And he, we're just watching it in bits, and then we're having conversations about it. And he's like, wow, I did not know that. And so we're having conversations, and then he can decide as he grows older how much he wants to engage with these things. I'm talking to him in the same way about drugs. I'm laying out a lot of information around drugs right now, and he's just able to ask questions. Well, like, why do people do that? And how is this drug different from that drug? I want him thinking critically about these things before he's in the situation where he needs to make like a pressured decision, or before he's older, because my kid is 12. So we want to engage them in the critical thinking before they're in a pressured situation to decide, what they're going to do, or before they're in a passive situation. Engage them. Like, what are you choosing? Why are you choosing it? How does it make you feel when you choose it? And just let them discover for themselves. And then they'll be like, okay, I need to make a different choice. They're gonna know. And they want to, I think, teens want to feel good. They want to know who they are. We all do. And so engaging them in conversation where you are really respecting their role in their own life is super important, about whatever we're talking about: drugs, screens, all of it.
Yeah. And so, yes, absolutely. We need to engage our kids in conversation, find out, ask them open-ended questions, see where they're at, get them to reflect on things. And I also think as parents that sometimes we set boundaries.
Yeah.
And we say, you know what? Like, I am not comfortable with how this is happening, and I am shutting off the Wi-Fi every night at 11. Doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. I'm happy to talk about it and hear feedback right now. And I'm the adult here, and this is the decision that I'm making, right? So to me, like, progressive education is all about empowering children, rejecting the hierarchical top-down model, and saying we need to empower these kids and, in a sense, treat them as equals. Well, of course, every human being and I are equal, right? And I think we kind of obfuscate our role as adults when we excessively over empower our children to make these decisions. Like, so the
Yes.
what conservative parents often do is they don't give their kids space to, the error often of parenting that's too kind of rigid and conservative is they don't develop self-reflective capacities in their kids, and then their kids rebel against it. Well, the danger in liberal parenting, which is probably more of our audience right now, is excessively letting your child, whatever age, manipulate a situation with their not yet developed enough brain.
Yes.
And this starts at a very young age with the why game, right? Why? Okay, well, there's a beautiful question in the why. Like, kid wants to know why. But then you see that the why is actually used as a form of manipulation. Like, oh, I'm gonna manipulate the situation by keep asking why. And as long as the parent keeps talking to me and telling me why, I'm in control of the situation. Mm-hmm. And so at a certain point, it's no, I'm done with the why. The why game's over. At a certain point, it's the internet is off and we are going for a hike today, and that's what we're doing. And you can give me whatever resistance you want. I am the adult in this house. I'm charged with raising you, and that's what we are doing, right? Happy to have a conversation now and hear your objections, and that's what we're doing, right? So like, to me, it's a both and, right? It's like we need this really broad toolbox as parents and educators to not top down, and also not be afraid to be top down when it's called for, but you can do that in a way that is respectful
Yeah.
of the children, right? You
Right.
definitely hear them, but there's a certain point when, okay, I've heard enough. Have you said everything you have to say about this? Is there anything I'm not hearing from you? Okay, and that's what we're doing. Because
Yes.
young teens, Sarah, they sound like adults, they talk like adults, they reason often like adults, but they are often reasoning out of a really underdeveloped frontal cortex that is incredibly immature and self-interested, right? Just not able to like see outside themselves. And this is the work as they get older in teens, they start to be able to like see outside themselves. So to me, there's different levels of freedom and responsibility that I'd give a 13-year-old. Even though that 13-year-old can talk like an adult, then I would give an 18-year-old. It's not developmentally appropriate to set hard kind of boundaries like that to an 18, 19-year-old, usually, but it is for a younger kid. So I'll stop talking.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And yeah, I feel like we could talk about that for a long time, but I'll just say, yes, like not too directive, not too permissive. Yes, relational connection, hearing each other out, and you're still the adult, you're still the parent. And so act like it also, right? Like model the mindfulness that we're talking about, model the self-regulation, the conscious communication skills, and model vulnerability, because we're in a highly stressful time. This time is calling on a lot of us to have a lot of different skills that maybe we're not necessarily adept at having. I know a lot of parents are in the home, and I actually heard that a lot of women have left the workplace, I don't know numbers, to go back into the home, specifically to school the children right now. And that's going to have ramifications in the workplace again, and just huge stuff going on. And so I've heard from many mothers, specifically, I usually work with women, like, I'm not cut out to be a teacher, and here I am at home being a teacher. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of stress that is happening in the home. So be gentle with yourselves, model vulnerability, model saying like, wow, we didn't expect the world to be going this way. Wow, you hear these different emotions coming up, and just modeling for your child what authenticity looks like. That's a very, very mindful skill. So, Andrew, I would like to invite us to wrap up. We've been going for about a half an hour here. Where can people find you if they want to set up a consult for you to work with their teen?
Website, Aspire High Asheville Mindful Mentoring is where one would do that. One can reach out to me on Facebook,
On
Messenger,
Facebook. Yeah.
whatever, however. And I want to do the work with your teens that it's hard for me to do with my own teens, because it's just hard for a parent to do that. It's hard for a parent to cook dinner, create family mealtime, manage school. And by the way, I'm also a mindfulness teacher, and I'm, developing, they're tired of hearing from you. So it's really, really important that that parents prioritize getting, if they feel like it would be beneficial, getting mentoring and guidance from non-parental adults for your teens at this time, especially because the number of adult role models is just the exposure to them is just not there right now.
Right. Yeah, I love how you said that. We're weaving a web, right? I have my child that I'm trying to do these things with, but then I also send him to other adults so that he can breathe with them and learn about emotional regulation from somebody who's not me, because he's way more apt to listen to somebody else's therapist, than me. I'll also say, I know that therapist offices are filling up right now. And maybe your kiddo needs a mental health intervention, and maybe they don't. Maybe they need another adult mentor. And we're saying, let's teach them mindfulness. Let's teach them these self-empowerment and self-regulatory skills so that they're coming into their true identity. We're going to talk in another week, I can't remember which one, around diagnoses and that kind of thing. Neither of us are therapists, but there is a stigma that is produced when we default to therapy sometimes. A member of my child's family is saying, does he have to go to therapy? Is he sick? And I'm like, his therapist is awesome, teaches the mindfulness, teaches the emotional regulation, goes outside and hikes in the woods with him. It's like, this is skill-based. This isn't because something's wrong with kids, right? If anything, our world is a little, how to say, effed up right now. and so what we're doing is getting the kiddos through this in a way where they are connected to self. They know their resiliency. They become the thinkers and the leaders that we're going to need in this world as it is changing. So you all can find me at sarahpoet.com, and I have a teen and young adult page where I'm working with teens in this self-identity development. So, all right, we will be back next week. Do you remember what our theme is next week?
I do not. Do you?
No.
We'll look it up.
Planned and written down somewhere, but it's not up here. So we will be back next week. Okay, we're gonna look it up real quick.
And it doesn't matter. Sarah and I are just talking and sharing our wisdom, but
it's individualism.
Oh, fun. I love their topics. We got individuation is like, man, the essence of becoming a teen. I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Me too. Thanks for being here, Andrew. Thanks for all you do.
Sarah, you are beautiful. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful afternoon.
Bye, y'all. Thanks for watching.